So Farmer Lee Jones is a sustainable grower of specialty and heirloom vegetables, herbs, microgreens. I don't know if you've ever got any of the boxes they send from the farm, but it's amazing. Edible flowers, all for chefs and restaurants all around the world. Keyword, chefs. And Farmer Lee has been in the farming industry for over 30 years, and he manages his 300-acre farm called the Chef's Garden, so appropriate, which is in Huron, Ohio. I have to share that Farmer Lee and the farm have won multiple awards, including the James Beard Foundation's Who's Who in Food and Beverage Award in 2011. This is my favorite, the Daily Meal's 60 Coolest People in Food recognition every year since 2012. Just amazing. Farmer Lee sits on the advisory boards of many, but in particular, Modern Farmer, Chef Concept, and Chef Magazine. Augusta Scoffier School of Culinary Arts is so fortunate that Farmer Lee is also a member of our advisory board. That's huge. His innovative practices and his contributions to sustainability are well aligned with Escoffier. In fact, as many of you already know, Chef Auguste Escoffier, the king of chefs and the chef of kings, years ago, he supported and he believed in the knowledge and awareness of local sourcing, right? He was an early pioneer of sustainable practices. That's another reason that today's event is so absolutely relevant to all of us. So that's enough from me. Without any further ado, Farmer Lee, welcome, welcome. How are you doing?
We're doing great. We're in the middle of a pandemic like you all, and we didn't ask for it, but we've got it. And so we're doing the best that we can. For the last 37 years, our total focus has been directly about supplying chefs. Whatever they wanted us to grow, we were going to figure out a way to grow it. 24 hours after the pandemic hit, we switched over and started going to a nationwide home delivery to be able to reach people that were looking for food at home so they didn't have to go to grocery stores. So it's been quite a transition for us. Once the restaurants, and we are starting to see restaurants a little bit starting to come back, Georgia and Texas, and I think Miami or Florida are starting to open up a little bit. So we're starting to hear back from some chefs, but we're gonna, regardless, when the chefs come back, we're gonna continue to do the home delivery to individuals, and hopefully this restaurant scene is gonna come back soon for all of our sakes. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said. Yeah, and we're all eager. We're listening to our governors, and we're
absolutely
doing to follow the guidance that they provide. I know that chefs around the country are super, super eager, and many are doing like what you are, doing what you can to get us through. So we've got lots of questions for you today. Are you ready?
Sure.
Our first question today comes from my 9-year-old son, Joseph Henry, who is obsessed with farming and farmers, and he really wants to know how you, in particular, got involved in farming. I think some of us know the story, but let's hear it from you.
Well, I think that it's in my DNA. I was on a tractor at 7 days old. I have a picture actually to prove that. And whenever I could, I was helping my dad on the farm. And, it's just absolutely amazing to be able to know what your passion is and to be able to do that for your entire life. And I think that, it's so important for all of the viewers on here today, when you figure out what that passion is, don't let anything stop you. Just stay on it, even if it means taking a job that's not exactly the job that you're after. If it's in the place that you can learn about what you're interested in, take it, and you're going to keep moving up. And our farm is actually located right along Lake Erie in an amazing microclimate. Have you guys ever heard of Cedar Point? It's always on Discovery Channel for highest, tallest, fastest roller coasters in the world. We're about 8 miles from Cedar Point Amusement Park. And Lake Erie is the shallowest of all the Great Lakes. Consequently, it's the warmest, and it creates an amazing microclimate. And at one point, I think it peaked in 1930, there were 330 vegetable growers in our county. As near as we can figure, it was the largest concentration of vegetable growers of any county in the United States. Now, there are counties in California where it's 100% agriculture from the north to the south, the east to the west. But that's owned by 30 farmers that each have 20 to 30,000 acres. These were small artisan or truck farmers that a large farm would have been 75, 80 acres, 100 acres. And it's hard for us to even fathom, because we can get on a freeway and go between Chicago and New York in a matter of 10 or 12 hours, 15 hours. You can move across the country pretty well today. But before 1940, roads and refrigeration had not developed to the point where there was a lot of outside competition. So if you think about where we're located, right on Lake Erie, an amazing microclimate. In fact, the soil that we're on about 11,000 years ago was all old lake bottom. It's some of the richest sandy loam in the world. So you have this amazing microclimate. Lake Erie is the shallowest, consequently it's the warmest. You get nice breezes coming off of the lake, and it provides a way for us to stay warmer later into the season. This all lake bottom soil. And then you've got Columbus, Ohio, 2 hours south of us, Cleveland, 1 hour east of us, Toledo, 1 hour west of us, Detroit, an hour and a half west of us, Cincinnati, 4 hours south of us, Pittsburgh, 3.5 hours west or east of us. You have all these large metropolitan areas and this amazing microclimate right in the center. And so these farmers really had kind of a nice captive audience. But as roads and refrigeration began to improve, then one by one, those small family farms went out because chain grocery stores came in and larger farms could do it on a larger scale. And one by one, the small grocery stores and the small family farms were pushed out. Our farm held on a lot longer because we worked with about 65 other growers in our community and packed all under one label. This is going back into the 70s and 80s, and packed under one label to be able to compete with larger farms. We did palletization and hydrocooling and packaging, top icing, and we would load semi after semi load of produce. We would load about 10 to 12 semi loads of produce a day. High volume, low margin. Farming chemically, farming commercially, farming the way the university was teaching us. It was all high volume. Ironically, interest rates are at a historic low today. You can borrow money for 2 to 3% right now. Interest rates in the late 70s, early 80s hit 21%. So you borrow $100, you pay the $100 back to the bank, and you pay $20 or $21 for the privilege of using that. Today, you borrow $100, you pay the $100 back, and you pay $3 for the privilege of using it. The economy got all turned upside down in the late 70s, early 80s. Interest rates at 21%. Our farm had our community had a hailstorm. And if you can visualize a head of cabbage and you're holding it in your hand and you've got a hammer, and you take for about 30 seconds and just hit the top of the head of the cabbage. There was about 300 acres of cabbage, a couple hundred acres of zucchini squash, several hundred acres of sweet corn, peppers, 1,200 acres in total. The hail was so widespread that it wiped out all the crops. And when I was 19 years old, just a quarter of a mile down from where I'm sitting right now on the farm that I grew up on, I stood at 19, I'm the oldest in the family, and I stood with my mom and dad, my brother and sister, all of our neighbors, all of our competitors, everybody that was there to celebrate our failure. And they auctioned every single piece of equipment that the family owned, every tractor, every wagon, every planter, everything that we owned, my mother's car, and our house was auctioned off to repay the loans. It's a foreclosure. And we literally crawled away. I'm not trying to paint a rags to riches story by any stretch of the imagination. In the culinary world, we have a saying that you're only as good as the last plate you serve. And we're only as good as the last box of vegetables that we deliver to a chef or now to a home user. So it's not a rags to riches story by any stretch, but we started over. And I could tell you guys stories that you possibly might not even believe. I mean, we were in survival mode. Ironically, it feels a little bit like that right now in the middle of this pandemic, because every one of our customers that we've built over the last 37 years closed up. And so we're fighting to try and rebuild a whole new customer channel through home delivery. So we're in a battle right now, and we're fighting for the farm and for the survival of the farm. So it's been quite a journey.
Amazing.
Anything you want to prompt off of that you want me to go further on, Kirk?
Oh yeah, just so much passion, and I'm sure we'll have some more questions. I just wanted to follow up with that a little bit. As you said, we're obviously in this unprecedented time in our country and around the world. And what adjustments, if you can share a few, have you had to make? You've talked about the home delivery to the overall business model. Talk about your employees due to COVID-19 and the situation that we're in. And along those lines, have you seen some differences in what your customers, what your chefs are actually ordering from you today?
Well, there are very few chefs that are ordering, other than we've been very grateful that those chefs are at home and they're cooking. And of course, everybody right now is cooking. Over 50% of the population, or over 50% of meals pre-COVID, were eaten outside of the home, which is all good news to all of us in training to become chefs. And people are dying to get back in their restaurants. I think that the thing that they may miss more than anything else is getting to go sit at a restaurant and not have to cook and be able to exchange. But obviously food safety has always been a huge thing for us when we're working with chefs. So we've really tried to take always a forward, aggressive, progressive manner in food safety, but we've really tripled down on those. Everybody is getting temperatures taken as they come in to the farm every single day. Obviously, if they are not feeling well, or if they have any kind of a temperature, we're asking them to stay home. But temperatures are monitored every day. Everybody's wearing lab coats in the packing rooms, plastic boots, plastic gloves, masks. And then as far as the equipment, we do a sterilization every day. We're doing a triple sterilization. We invested, and this was really kind of a big decision, because, I mean, the revenue stopped from the restaurants, and we're trying to start back up with the home delivery, but that volume is one fifth of the volume that we're doing with the restaurant. So we had been doing some testing for a company that does this system. It's an air purification system that actually will kill bacteria within the air. And we made the decision, and it was quite a heated discussion, because there's no money, no extra money right now, but we made the decision to spend $50,000 to put this air purification system in to the packing facility. One, to provide the safest environment for the team that are coming into work and taking a risk by coming to work right now. You know, the easier choice would be to stay at home until it's over. But a lot of our team made the decision to come in. And so we wanted to provide the safest environment we could for them in that working environment. There's been a lot of little things. One of the big things we're trying to do right now is change the mix of what we're planting, right? One of the big things that we've been famous for over the years is microgreens and edible flowers, and a lot of really little sexy things for on fine dining plates. For example, we do a micro cucumber. When I say cucumber, we pretty much all think like a cucumber that's 8 inches long and, you know, so big around and shiny green. We do a cucumber that's 1 inch long, the diameter of your pen, and then it's got a silver dollar shaped bright yellow blossom on the end of it. Cucumber this long, the flower this big. If you can imagine that floating in a chilled soup, if you can imagine that in a salad, if you can imagine that in a cocktail, it just, I mean, what we've really worked on over the last 37 years is providing the best flavored vegetables we could, but unique. We couldn't compete head to head growing mass production volume. It's a niche market. It's a small market within a bigger market we're specialized in, that does something unique and provides a special service to the market. And so for 37 years, we've tried to have the sexiest, most flavorful, unique textures, shapes, colors, flavors that could exist for chefs. Right now, we're feeling like that's really not that important. right now, I think it's more about comfort and safety. We're looking maybe for the first time in many years at growing more of a traditional bush blue lake green bean and a yellow wax bean and a lima bean. We're looking at growing more traditional Roma tomatoes and round red tomatoes, and less of we have a tomato that is literally the size of your pinky fingernail, if you can imagine how long it takes to pick a basket of those. But we just don't think that's where the market is. The market is moving. We don't know exactly where that's going to end up, but we think that the demands are going to be different going into August and September and October and November. It's really more about kind of comfort food. For the first time in 35 years, we're going to grow sweet corn and make that available. So it's one of the things that we're doing is looking at changing the mix of the products because we think the demand will be different. So we've got to change to meet this, to fulfill the supply of the demand that we think is existing. We don't know what that is, but we're making our best hypothesis as to what we think it is. Our assumption is less of the fancy, sexy stuff right now and a little bit more traditional comfort food. So it's really about trying to stay tuned to when these restaurants are going to come back on. We still want to fulfill what their needs are, try and understand what those needs are. You know, if we don't keep planting right now, when they do come back on, let's say it's in July, and we're not planting right now, because this stuff takes 30, 60, 90, 120 days. So there's a little bit of speculation going on to try and guess as to when it's going to open up and what it is that they're going to need. Look, the reality is that those of us that can adapt and change to the new market demands are going to survive. And those of us that can't adapt and make the changes and pivot, we're going to die. And so we're fighting like heck to try and move to where we think the market's going. It's just an unknown for all of us. So it makes it a little bit interesting for sure.
Just amazing commentary. And students, I hope you hear the lesson here, right? Like Farmer Lee is saying, you've got to look at your market. You have to listen to your customers. You have to understand what's going on in the environment, and you have to pivot, right? And that's what everybody's doing right now. They're pivoting. You know, I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm still fascinated by the Chef's Garden name, and I'm gonna share my screen real quick, and I'm gonna show a very brief little video that starts to talk about that, and then we'll come back to you, Farmer Lee, and maybe to speak about it a little bit. So we'll just take a second here. I'll share my screen, and here we go.
We chose the name The Chef's Garden for a reason. Every single thing we do is with the chef in mind.
This is not new for us. We've always done research of some kind. The whole conception when we started here was to grow a better vegetable and more unique vegetables than anybody else. And that always takes research because we were doing what nobody had done. We've got a tremendous investment in this, and we have really two focuses. One is on our traditional research with new varieties. And the other part of it is what can we do to make those varieties grow better? Not by changing them, not by genetic modification or pulling any fancy bells and whistles, but just finding out what form of biology aids those plants and causes them to taste better. Not that we don't think our vegetables are good now. We think we got the best ones going now, but you have to improve.
So well done, so well done. So the name, was that something that the family decided upon, or did it just make sense at the time?
We did. You know, when we lost the farm and we started over, we started back at farmers markets. We met a chef, and she had trained in Europe, and she came here back from Europe, came here, was going to farmers markets. In the 80s, farmers markets were really at a historic low. But it was the only place we knew how to start over, because we could start back at a farmer's market, we could put something in the ground, and we could convert it to cash within 30 to 40 days. And so that's what we did. I mean, I'm telling you, survival mode. There were trucks that didn't get a bid at the sheriff's sale, and we resurrected those and started back to farmers markets. My mother was going to one. My grandmother and aunt were going to one. You know, I was going to one, my dad was going to one, my brother was going to a different farmer's market. We were using trucks that didn't get a bid at the sheriff's sale. We patched them up with enough to go to these farmers markets. But here was where we met a woman. Her name was Iris Balin. She was a professionally trained chef, and she had trained over in Europe. She came back here and she was looking for products grown without chemical, grown for the flavor, grown for the integrity and the quality of the product rather than the tons per acre. In the United States, farmers, as it relates to our income, produce food cheaper than any other country in the world as it relates to our income. And they do it very well. And I'm not trying to knock those farmers. The farmers are existing and surviving within the model that has been generated in America, and that is to produce food cheap. And they do it very, very well. The conundrum is that we produce food cheaper than any other country in the world, but we also have the highest healthcare in the world. So the way we're growing it is efficient for growing large tons per acre, but the nutrient density, the integrity, the chemicals that are being used to grow it efficiently are counterproductive to sustainability or regenerative agriculture. So in those, when we started looking at this and Iris introduced us this other way of life, we were doing farmers markets. They were 99.9% of our business. And here was this handful of chefs that Iris introduced us to and said, we need to grow for chefs, but everything they were looking for was different than the way we were growing at farmers markets. And we sat down, we would tend to, in the winter, regroup and decide what we were going to do for that next season. And so after we had lost the farm, we were going to farmers markets, we met the chef, Iris Balin. She introduced us to this whole other world of the chef world that you guys are in or moving into. And we didn't know anything about chefs or the culinary world, but what she said really resonated with us. And so we were sitting in a barn around a cardboard card table. We had some glasses of water. We were sitting there having a discussion. And my dad said, look, we're either going to do farmers markets or we're going to figure out what these chefs want us to grow, and we're going to figure out the right way to grow it. We're jack of all, master of none. We're going to do one or the other. And I'm 23 years old. We're scratching out some customers at the farmers markets. We're getting a little rhythm. And so we had a family vote. I voted first, and I said, well, if we've got to decide, these chefs want everything entirely different than what we're used to doing it. And we're building some regular business at farmers markets. I say if we've got to do one or the other, we abandon the chefs and we go with the farmers markets. And we went all the way around the table. My brother voted, my sister voted, my mother voted, and my dad was the last to vote. And he took a clenched fist and he slammed it down on the card table. The glasses with water in them went flying because it was a cardboard table. They sprung for it. He said, absolutely not. He said, what Iris is suggesting that we do and the way that we do it is what our farm needs to do, and it's the direction this country needs to go. We're abandoning the farmers markets. We're going to go after the chef business. Your brother and I are going to figure out the right way to do this. And you're going to get out there and you're going to find every chef you can find, and you're going to find out what they want us to grow. My vote counts for 5. Yours only counts for 1. This vote is over. This discussion is over. Now you got work to do. Now go get after it. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever had any family votes like that, but that is exactly the way that vote went. And so from there on, we went to building relationships, and it's been an amazing journey with chefs over the last 37 years. And from Wolfgang Puck to Charlie Trotter to Danielle Ballou to Alain Ducasse to Thomas Keller, and they've all been here. And it's just a true honor to have had this journey with them. We're at a fork in the road, and we're going to have to kind of figure out what the next stage of this journey is. It's a little bit scary. It's apprehensive, but we're up for that challenge, and we're going to try and figure it out. We've done it before. We've got to do it again. I don't know if I answered the question or not.
You did, in a very passionate way. We're super happy your dad put his fist down. That's
He was right.
Has to go that way. Yeah. He was right. I'd love to come back to. I'm going to show another quick video. When we talked previously, you talked about the influence of the lake.
Yeah.
I just think that's so important. I'm going to show a quick video here, and then maybe we can come back and talk about that more for our students. So let me share the screen one more time, and here we go.
When we started over, we were left with very little land, but fortunately, that land is some of the best in the United States. We're located just 2.9 miles inland from Lake Erie. The lake provides a microclimate that is perfect for farming. When the cool autumn winds blow across the lake, the water warms the air, protecting our plants long into the fall and providing a longer growing season. The land that we farm is ancient lake bottom. It's some of the richest sandy loam in the world. Our goal is to maintain and to build the health of the soil.
Just amazing. And for all the students, you know, if you go to the Chef's Garden website, you know, there's longer versions of those videos. But when we think about the soil, right, the climate, your location, you talked about that a little bit earlier. It all seems to come together so beautifully. But Farmer Lee, maybe explain to the students a little bit why that soil is so important. It almost looks sandy from the, you know, from the film there.
Well, I mean, there's several different ways the conversation could go. I mean, we believe that all health starts with healthy soil. And we have a saying that healthy soil, healthy vegetables, healthy people. And the way that we're farming today, and I don't mean we, but I mean society, and, you know, we're farming with chemical and we're farming with genetic modified product. And the reason we are is because who's making the money? Pharmaceutical companies and the chemical companies. And, you know, the farmers have to survive within the model that exists, and that's to produce cheap food with commodity items like soybeans, wheat, and corn, which is predominantly what's grown around here, are commodity items. They have no ability to affect the price they get for those products. The only thing that they can do is trying to control the costs. They've got to keep their costs very low because they have no ability to affect the price. It's all supply and demand and keep the costs low. And so the chemical companies recognize that they could help the farmers, quote, help the farmers by keeping costs lower by providing genetically modified seed. So when they plant it, they spray it, and it kills everything that's alive on the top of the soil other than the genetically modified seed. So it eliminates going through with more times over the land with tractors to cultivate and eradicate the weeds, because the weeds compete. So when you use those chemicals, you're killing off all the biology that's happening in the soil. What we're trying to do is to go back to farm the way our great grandparents did. My dad has a saying that the only thing we're trying to do is get as good as the growers were 100 years ago. And if you think about that, it was pre-chemical, it was pre-synthetic fertilizer. You guys have heard maybe of farms rotating their crops. Well, farms today rotate the crops, but it's between corn, wheat, and beans. Where they had beans last year, they put corn this year. Where they had the corn this year, they put wheat next year. It's a rotation. The land never rests. You can actually go back to biblical times. In the Old Testament, harvest fruit for 6 years. On the 7th year, let the fruit fall to the ground. They let the land rest. The fruit composted, and it gave the land a chance to breathe. And we believe in those principles. So what we're doing out of the 300 acres, we're doing lab analysis. Maybe some of your listeners here have gone in before for blood work. You have blood work and you find that you're high in iron or low in iron, high in calcium, low in calcium. You can find out what's going on in the soil. And a lot of times there are deficiencies in the soil. There might be times when it's really high in something. So what's really cool is, and it's our personal belief, not trying to cast my aspersions on anybody, but it's our personal belief that God designed a system far superior to anything we can fake out chemically or synthetically. It's about working in harmony with nature rather than trying to outsmart it. So we do soil samples on the land, break it down into different plots. Out of the 300 acres, you don't just do one soil sample. There are different soils, heavier soils, lighter soils, sandier soils, like we saw on the video, and we break them down into about plots of 1 acre plots, and we do soil tests on those. Based on the deficiencies that we find in the soil, then we plant crop specific. So out of the 300 acres, 200 acres of it in any 1 year is sitting fallow in a cover crop. So it might be in clover or vetch or buckwheat or barley or rye. We even have a mixture where we have 17 different varieties of plants. And the plant comes up, and then you can visualize, if you can imagine those leaves like an antenna. And in those 2/3 of the acreage, and 200 out of the 300 acres are harvesting the sun's energy. It's really cool to think that you can capture the energy from the sun, pull it down through the plant, into the stem, into the root. And then the next year, in that 100 acres, we're going to rotate around. And when we plant the turnip or the beet or the carrot or the radish or the spinach or the tomato or whatever it is we want to grow to take to market, it picks that back up. And then when we eat it, it builds our immune system. I like to be able to compare it to thinking about like the Eastern culture. The Eastern culture wants to get your body in balance to defend against the disease in the first place. The Western culture is, and I'm guilty of it, let's say you get a strep throat. And what do? You go to the doctor and he writes you a script for a penicillin, a moxicillin, a viacillin. Western culture is always treating the symptom after you get the problem. The Eastern culture is get the body in balance to defend against it. So what we're really trying to do is farm kind of from an Eastern culture approach of getting the soil in balance, get it balanced. And when it's in balance, then everything else works right. So you have healthy soil, healthy vegetables, healthy people. And that's really the premise of what we're trying to do. The fact that we're in this microclimate, it's a microclimate is a unique set of circumstances that allows a small, specific region to be different. If you go 10 miles further south from here, that changes. It's not the same conditions. That lake effect just handles a little ridge right along the edge here, and we're right in that. That's why we are where we are. That's why those 330 vegetable growers in 1930 were right in this area, because it was an amazing microclimate to grow. The water temperature stays warm, you get gentle breezes off, and it keeps you from freezing, and it allows the plants to build up a resistance to the cold, and it extends our season. But this rich sandy loam is just unbelievable for growing. So you've got that as a premise. Then you've got to treat the soil right. And that's really what we're trying to do.
Just amazing. Students, I just want to reiterate a couple of words that Farmer Lee brought up: balance and harmony. The way they approach the soil, the way they approach their craft, the same way when you step to the stoves, every time that you prepare a dish and you create a plate, always think about balance and harmony. You know, Farmer Lee, how are you feeling? We've been going
Feeling great.
Are you good? Are you good? Because I've got a couple more questions.
Sure, bring them.
And then we're going to go to Chef Bob for a few student questions. But we're about a half hour in, and if you feel good, I feel good.
I feel great.
I wanted to comment. I know that, you know, Escoffier is very good friends with Curtis Duffy, Chef Curtis Duffy, who has a special place in his heart for you, and the same for you. He introduced us to you, and we're so grateful that he did. It leads me to, and I've talked to Curtis quite a bit about how he became successful, right? And you had a lot to do with that. If you had to share maybe one or two keys to your success, we've talked about a lot today. We've talked about the farm and the plants and the climate. But for the students here with us today, are there one or two or three things that just are that you can never compromise, the keys to your success and your family's success?
Well, what comes to mind is the race doesn't always go to the fastest or the smartest, but to the person that thinks that they can. And a lot of things we've accomplished, we were too stupid to know we couldn't do them. And whatever your passion is, whatever this industry, the culinary industry, is so diverse and so wide. Whatever it is that you're particularly passionate about, don't yield to anybody else's opinion. The only opinion that matters is yours. And once you've decided what part of this really turns you on, then you do everything that you can to keep your focus on it. There are so many different ways to go down the wrong rabbit hole. And you're going to go down some wrong rabbit holes. But if you know what your goal is, if you don't know what your goal is, you'll never get there. We normally have about 600 visiting chefs a year that come and visit us. One of the pieces that the clips you saw there where the chefs were in the kitchen is a place that we have called the Culinary Vegetable Institute. You guys can follow the Culinary Vegetable Institute on Facebook or check out the website. But we have chefs there, and we have students and we have chefs that come in actually to the Culinary Vegetable Institute. We have businesses that want to do R&D and R&R. But it's really about keeping your focus. We have all these chefs come in and they get excited about seeing what we're doing, and they're saying, well, why don't you do this, or you could do this, or you could do this, or you could do this. Charlie Trotter was one of those guys that didn't end up creating an empire of 30 or 40 or 100 restaurants. He always wanted to dig deeper. He loved vegetables. That's why we had such a great relationship with them. And he was always about digging a little bit deeper, and there was always something more to do to get better. And our focus is to grow the most nutritious, healthiest, most flavorful vegetables that are humanly possible in the world. And that's our goal. Understand what your goal is, identify your goal, and then regardless of listen to other people, get ideas from them, but keep your focus on what it is that you want to accomplish. Don't worry about the money. When we lost the farm, I was enrolled at Ohio State. When we lost the farm, I left school. I'm the oldest in the family, came back and went to work with my dad. And, there was no paycheck for 20 years. I ate good, and we survived, but there was no paycheck. I never did this for the money. I did it because it was in my heart. It's what I wanted to do. It's in my DNA. I'm a farmer. I wanted to grow vegetables. I wanted to work with my family. You saw the older gentleman on there? That's my dad. I watched that and it almost makes me come to tears because I have had the privilege of working with my dad for the last 40 years, and my brother and my son and our family. It's a family farm. And those were things that were important to me. And so regardless of what kind of crap came at us, whoever was throwing whatever, you knew what your goal was. It was to be a part of a family business and to grow the healthiest, most nutritious vegetables that existed. Identify your goals. And don't get lost going. Here's how life can be. Have you guys ever gone onto the computer because you were going to look something up, and the next thing you know, you're about 15 miles down the road from what you went on the computer for? It happens to us because you're like, oh, well, that looks interesting. Oh, and all of a sudden wait a minute. That's so darn far away from what I came onto the computer for. Life can be the same way. Make sure you know what your goals are, and every once in a while, you got to kind of reel yourself back in and say, wait a minute, where am I trying to go here? Let's get regrouped and get refocused on what it is that I want to accomplish. And I think that's really critical.
That's amazing. Students, the key takeaway right there, identify and understand your goals and then stay focused on those goals. I absolutely love that. Farmer Lee, I've got a question from a student. His name's Franklin. It's a great question. He says he wants to know how farmers go about implementing advancements in technology. He brings up artificial intelligence. I've seen some of that on the video. So he's curious about better estimating the yield, the health of your crops, and a way to avoid pitfalls that might compromise your harvest. If you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think it's a great question. Definitely, it is becoming a huge thing. And I think that, of course, right now we don't think about labor shortages in this middle of this pandemic, but labor in kitchens and labor on farms that understand what they're doing have been continuing to be tighter and tighter and tighter. We can't find people with the experience to come onto the farms, and they can't find enough people in kitchens with enough experience because there's been so much growth. In Holland, over in Europe, they're so much further advanced in agricultural farms than we are here because labor has been so short and so expensive for so long that they've really pushed that much faster. If you really want to know about that AI and the advancement, that's where it's really, really burgeoning. It's happening. It's coming here. We use some of it. We've probably been slow to take it on. None of it's cheap, but we're embracing it in many ways. We're going back to the way our great-grandparents farmed, but we also believe that as a small family farm, if we don't embrace technology, we're not sustainable. So it's kind of like two opposite polar opposites colliding back to be able to create our farm, is going back and going ahead at the same time. We're using a I even had them write this down. We've got 5 scientists on staff that know way more in depth about this sort of thing than I do. We're using a gas chromatography mass spectrometer. We're using a liquid chromatography mass spectrometer, an ion chromatography, infrared gas analyzer, a muffle furnace. What we're trying to do, and those are in the lab that you saw just a little glimpse of, what we're trying to do is break these vegetables down. We're doing research from products that are on shelves of commercially grown, chemically grown, mass production, and breaking it down and then comparing that to ours. We know we're never going to be able to compete producing large volumes very, very efficiently. And it's, quite frankly, it's not where our interest is, because it's producing food, but there's no nutrition or nutritional value, or very little to it. Look, I think that everybody in the country understands that we must move towards plant-based, plant-forward future for sustainability or regenerative agriculture. And I think that everybody gets that at this point, but I don't think that we're really looking at the integrity of the plant. As we become more dependent upon eating plants, we're seeing, even in the middle of this pandemic, it shows up our weaknesses in our country. The bottlenecks are we can't get the protein from the farm through the plant back to the shelves. And which makes it even more important that we focus on plants. And it's important for us to understand the nutrient and the nutrient densities of these to make sure that there's an integrity there that will help build our bodies and build our immune systems and sustain us. So we're definitely using that. The AI, it's a great question. I like how you're thinking. We're using it. It's basically anything that you can use technology to measure. You can measure the nutrient needs. There's cameras that'll actually look and take pictures of the leaf and be able to tell that it's deficient in something. We're not using any of that, but that technology is out there and it's becoming more affordable. We use it to measure humidity and air temperature, and as air temperature goes down, heat comes on. As temperature goes up, ventilators open up. That's all automatic, and it used to be all manual. So good question. We're using it. We're not embracing it as much as we could be or should be, but they all take dollars to do, and it's really becomes one of making the right decisions at the right time for your individual situation.
Thank you for that. I'm sure Franklin is incredibly excited that his question got asked. We'll take just a couple more questions. Chef Bob is with us, who worked for Charlie Trotter for 2 years, by the way, and he's going to grab at least a couple of questions from our students. So, Bob, it's all you.
All right, great. Excuse me, so many great questions. I wish we could stay on all afternoon and answer them all. But this one comes from Alexander Cochran to everyone. How has the onset of climate change and global warming impacted the sustainability of the farm? What is the single most important message you'd like to send to larger growers and the animal agriculture industry in relationship to global warming?
Wow, that's quite a question.
We've got some great students out there.
I guess it is affecting us. I think that it's a very slow change. I don't know that we'll fully understand or appreciate the effects of this until after we're gone, but it certainly doesn't mean that we shouldn't be concerned and that we aren't concerned right now. We are very concerned. It's making our area warmer longer. One of the real advantages we've had in our area is good, hard, cold winters. People say, how in the world can you grow vegetables in Ohio in the winter? And in some cases, some things you can't, but the cold temperatures will give you a natural killing off of disease and insects. And the last couple of winters, it's been very mild, which then creates more of a population of insects, and it also creates more disease issues. So definitely the global warming is affecting us negatively. In the short term, you know, it extends our season a little bit, but those are very short term. We would prefer not to have that. You know, it's hard for me to say. We have trouble trying to figure out what we're doing, but to give advice to other large farms, you know, who am I to tell them what to do? I can just make a general statement in that, you know, I think that There are ways to rebuild nutrients in the soil without the chemical and synthetic inputs. And I think that there's a lot of things that we know to do right now, and we can be doing them. You know, the pressure is on because the model that those large farms exist in, they didn't create the model. They're trying to survive within that model that exists. And that model is to produce food cheap. It really becomes up to us as consumers to make those choices. Sometimes they're financial and we have to make that choice to buy the cheapest food. But you know, there's an old saying that we have on the farm: you can either pay the farmer now or you can pay the doctor later. And maybe if you're young right now, you can get away with kind of, you know, the saying in computers, garbage in, garbage out. Maybe you can cheat the system a little bit right now. But when you get to be a crusty old guy like me, and you try and take those shortcuts and you're trying to put garbage in and get quality out the other end, it doesn't work. I think that it really paying a little bit more where you spend your dollars. When you become a chef and you have to make those decisions, the Landry's organization, I get to work with a chef by the name of Tony D, an Ohio guy like Curtis Duffy. They were, you know, they had the pencil pushers that were adamant that what's the price of yours? We'd love to buy from your small family farm, but what's your price? Well, that's $3 a case more than I can get it from this guy. And so I've got to buy the cheaper lettuce. Well, they actually did some studies and they brought it in side by side. And ours had more flavor, it had more body, it held up longer, it had better shelf life. And they did side by side tests, and they even sat the stuff out for several days to see how it would, if you can imagine bringing something out in a warm kitchen and leaving it sit and it starts to break down. Even though they paid a little bit more for it, it took them less lettuce to be able to generate the salads. And it was $3 more per case, but they actually made more money by using ours. So, you know, a lot of times the only way that people think about saving money is comparing the price. And there's so much more to looking at a product or products when you consider that it's really important to look at all of it. I don't know, again, I kind of went off subject there a little bit from your question, Bob.
Well, you're not short on passion, Farmer Lee, and we we appreciate it so much.
Perfect.
If you're okay, and you have time for one more question. Chef Bob will share that with you, and then we'll start to wrap it up. So, Chef Bob, one more great question.
Yeah, this one comes from Jada Cole. What kind of pest control measures do you use? Do you spray all year or at the beginning of the season, or only as needed?
Well, and only as needed, but a lot of times what we're really doing is integrated pest management. I don't think that we showed any, but if you guys go onto YouTube under Chef's Garden and look at some of the videos, you'll see these yellow sticky pads. And we have those throughout the whole greenhouse, and we even have them outside. And we have one person, that's their job, is to go around and inspect those yellow sticky pads. And those are indicators. When we see insects on those, then we know that we can release other insects that will eat the larva of those insects. They won't kill an adult insect, but they will kill the next generation. So a lot of this, we're working through a system called integrated pest management. It works particularly well within a controlled environment, just like the artificial intelligence, working best in controlled environments like greenhouses or tunnels or cold frames, where it's a controlled environment. And we put these, we'll actually buy, instead of buying chemical, we'll buy boxes. And that's a whole other part of the agriculture. There's a company that grows insects, raises insects, and you can buy them and they come FedEx, and we release those insects into the environment, and they go after what their diet is to eat the larva of the insect that's eating our plant. So it's a year-round project. We have been helped in harder winters when it's cold, really cold. We wipe out some of that population. So, you know, it all kind of weaves together. With the global warming, it becomes more critical. Probably most of the listeners don't remember, but when I was a kid, there was a show called Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Kirk and I might be the only two on here to remember that show. Maybe Bob, if you were at Trotter's, I don't know. What years were you at Trotter, Bob?
Oh my gosh, I was there 1990 and 1991.
Okay, so you were there with Guillermo.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, awesome. But
Renee
on
mentioned
Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, it was always fun for us on the farm to see all these animals from other parts of the world. And there were a herd of gazelle, for example, and the cougar or the tiger would track down the herd of gazelle, and they would go after the weakest or the oldest gazelle. And it was pretty violent. They probably don't even show that today on, but you know, that's what would be attacked, would be the weakest or the oldest animal. The same thing happens with insects. It's all about survival of the fittest. And this is what's really cool. The best way to be able to defend against the diseases and the insects is to have healthy soil and healthy plants. Because if it's a healthy plant, the insect doesn't want to go to it. The insect wants to go to a weakened plant that's diseased or got some sort of an issue with it, and that's the plant that it'll go after. So if you can get healthy soil, we'll even do something. We have these machines, but when the seed comes in, if you can visualize carrot seeds, 150,000 seeds in 5 pounds. They're small, about the size of a BB. We'll actually put these in a gravity chamber and spin them and sort them into 5 different sizes. We have found a direct correlation with it's not only 5 different sizes, but 5 different weights. We found a direct correlation with the weight of the seed and the quality of the endosperm. So those lighter seeds aren't as healthy. In many cases, we'll pack those lighter seeds up and send them back to the seed company and say, this stuff is junk, it's unacceptable, we don't want it. And at the first couple of times we did that, they're like, what are you talking about? Well, they knew that we knew what we were talking about, and they're like, oh, okay, and they took it back. A heavier seed was an indication of a higher quality endosperm. If you think about that, when you're putting a healthy seed into that ground, it has a better start. And when it can take off, and then it has the ability to pick up all of those nutrients in the soil, and it takes off and it's vibrant and it's alive. And so the insects don't want to go to that. So I think that's really our best offense at not using chemicals, is really creating healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy vegetables, healthy people.
Just amazing, just amazing. Students, you have a true partner in Farmer Lee here. Chefs-garden.com, right? That's the website.
Right.
We encourage you to take a peek whenever you can. I'm going to take you off the spotlight there just for a minute and put you in with the rest of us, Farmer Lee.
Instagram, you can do Farmer Lee Jones.
There you go, on Instagram. We'll do this again if you're willing, Farmer Lee. This was an absolutely monumental hour. We're so thankful. You're passionate. You're a great storyteller. We can't thank you enough. Students, let's see some clapping and thumbs up, okay?
Well, you know, Escoffier did so much for the entire culinary industry, and to have been invited onto the board for Escoffier has been such an honor for me personally and our family. And what you folks are doing, the education that you're providing the students is truly second to none. And I am very, very honored to be a small part of this. I hope I can stay in contact with each and every one of the students. Continue to share with us what you're doing, and good luck with your future. You're on the right track. This is a darn good program.
Well, I can't say it any better, and we're going to end it right there. That's absolutely amazing. We're going to record all this. We'll push it out to everybody. Be sure to talk to your instructors about Farmer Lee and about farming in general. We appreciate you. Thank you, Farmer Lee. I'll be in touch, and I'll reach out to Michelle and Nathan first thing tomorrow, okay?
Sounds great. Have a good evening. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You too. Nice
Thanks so
meeting you.
much.
Thank you, chefs.